We've got initial kit information on not just the two new characters coming in patch 6.2, those being Durin and Jahoda, but also information on how Hoyo is buffing some old Mondstat characters. So in today's video, we'll be going over what we know so far, and how good these characters and buffs sound like they should or shouldn't be, and for what teams. But first, if you're planning to pull for any of the current or upcoming characters, you'll want to check out today's sponsor, Top Up Live. Top Up Live is a third-party top-up center that lets you top up on Genesis crystals and Welkin moons at a large discount compared to the in-game prices. When you go to Top Up Live, you'll just search and select the Genshin Impact, and you'll see all the current discounts they have available, with discounts of up to 28% off compared to the in-game prices. They even have special bundles for enough crystals to guarantee the current rate of characters. Topping up is fast and secure. All you have to do is put in your in-game user ID and your server. Your Genesis crystals will be delivered straight to your account in seconds. If you got first-time buyer bonuses available, you'll still get those as well. So use my link in the description and pinned comment with my code Noir, and you'll get an additional 12% discount. Thank you, Top Up Live. Now back to the video. Alright, so starting with Durin, he's a burst-based off-field pyro DPS. His kit functions as follows. He'll cast his skill, and he'll make pyro particles plus refund a massive 33 energy to himself. And similar to Chiari, you can follow up by pressing skill again or by pressing normal attack. Pressing skill will enter the white dragon form, while pressing normal attack will enter the black dragon form. In the black dragon form, Durin's burst will do single target pyro damage in what seems to be intervals of once per second, and he'll also give himself 40 vape/melt reaction damage bonus. So in this mode, he's intended to go all in on his own amplified pyro sub DPS damage like an off-field hyper carry. Whereas in the white dragon form, he still hits in what seems to be 1 second intervals with a bit lower of a multiplier, though the damage becomes AoE, and instead of buffing his own vape/melt damage, instead, when party members trigger Swirl, Crystallize, Burning, or Overload, enemy resistance to Pyro at its corresponding element is decreased by 20%. So you get less multipliers on Durin, but gain AoE and some buffing compared to the Black Dragon form being more selfish. Additionally, if you have two total arcane characters in your team, those being Durin as well as the Mondstat characters getting buffed, so Razor, Fischl, Sucrose, Mona, Venti, Klee, and Albedo, Durin's own vape/melt buff is increased to 70%, and his res shred to 35%, while the other arcane characters will also gain a new passive. Venti's arcane passive makes it so that when his burst is active, if an on-field character triggers Swirl, they gain 50 damage bonus, and Venti's own burst damage is increased by 35% multiplicatively, so he becomes a better buffer and sub DPS on an emo DPS team specifically. Klee becomes a stronger DPS, giving herself up to a 50% multiplicative buff to her charged attacks. Albedo becomes a bit better of a buffer while also fixing his construct issues. Basically now he creates a clone of his flower, and if his flower breaks, the clone will take over its effect, and it'll provide a team-wide damage bonus buff up to 12%, while other arcane characters get 30%. Mona gains the ability to extend the duration of her burst omen a bit by performing normal and charged attacks. These auto attacks will also grant stacks that will increase a party member's vaporized reaction damage bonus by 10%, up to 30% total if you have all 3 stacks, though the stacks will be consumed after just 1 vape. Sucrose will now provide a 5.7% buff to all damage, 7% buff to arcane characters. It's unclear right now if that's damage bonus or a multiplicative buff, but it's relatively small either way. Still, Sucrose is already a really good character, so a small new buff for her is fine. Razor's arcane passive gives him a hit of electro damage plus 7 energy refund when his electro stickers overflow, which honestly, that doesn't seem like it's going to do anything for him at all, really. And then Fischl gives a 22.5% attack buff to the active character when any party member triggers Overload, or 90 Elemental Mastery when they trigger Electro or Lunar Charged. So there's a lot going on here. Some of these characters will make good teammates for Durin in some of his teams, for example using him and Mona together in a Mualani team, or him and Fischl together in an Overload team, and so on. But they don't have to be paired together, with Durin specifically. Using any combination of 2 arcane characters will enable their arcane passives, so there's a lot of possibilities to look into with this, which we'll be doing in its own dedicated video. But as far as Durin goes, since we lack sufficient information to calc him at the moment, such as exact hit intervals, particles, ICD, and so on, for now we can just theorize on what teams sound like they should be good for him. One of the first teams I thought of using Durin in was with Mualani, but his res shred does not trigger off her Vaporize, so he won't actually be buffing her. Using him as the Pyro would enable the arcane passive of Mona though, which C1 Mona is currently best in slot with Mualani, so that could be good, but it's coming at the expense of losing Mavrika's Vape to burst damage and her own damage bonus buff, so it likely won't be an upgrade, but a side grade that frees up Mavrika would still be nice if he can do that. The next team I thought of is Wanderer. Unfortunately, Wanderer does not count as an arcane character like we hoped, but Durin still has relatively high multipliers for off-field pyro damage, while granting pyro resonance and 20% res shred, so I'd be surprised if this isn't at least a slight upgrade over Farina. Something interesting to also consider is, for people that don't have C6 powers on yet, you might be able to use Venti instead and not be missing out on too much, since using Cam you're now getting 15% more res shred from Durin and 50% damage bonus on Wanderer from Venti's own arcane passive. Plus, if Venti's burst is actually hitting enemies and you snapshot Bennett on him, he could actually do some decent sub-DPS of his own while battering Durin and Bennett with his 15 energy refund. And speaking of energy, playing double Pyro would be a lot better for energy in Stygian Onslaught than using Farina. Another idea is Child, replacing Zhongling with Durin, and then you might even replace Kazuha with Sucrose to get the arcane passives, though I'm not quite sure that would be worth it. But depending on the ICDs, Durin is very likely to outdamage Zhongling here while needing very little energy recharge, so you won't have to spend so much time funneling to him like you do with Zhongling, thus should be able to do shorter rotations for much more DPS. And per usual, there's new team possibilities for Nuvalette. I'm thinking the best option would be Nuvalette, Farina, Durin, Shalonen, focused on vaporizing Durin's Black Dragon damage, but I really don't see that being better than Nuvalette's Hyperbloom team. Klee, she counts as an arcane character herself, so you could use her and Durin together, perhaps with Farina and Shalonen, forward vaporizing Farina's damage off all the pyro, or Overload Klee could possibly be good, with Klee, Chevres, Durin, and Fischl. Speaking of Overload, Durin could also possibly be an upgrade or side grade to Mavrika or Zhongling for these teams, so for Electro DPS, that would be Durin, Chevres, and Iansan, or Fischl for DPS that don't use Iansan very well, such as Raiden or Sino. For Varesta and Clorand, I don't really see this being an upgrade over Mavrika, but I can see it being an upgrade to Raiden and Sino's Overload team since they didn't use Mavrika well to begin with. However, I don't expect this to be nearly enough to make Overload as good as Hyperbloom for these two. Linny Overload could be good though, with Linny, Chevres, Durin, and Fischl. If Durin's Pyro application is reasonably fast, you should have Pyro Aura for Linny's self buff on most if not all of his damage, while getting buffs from all three of Chevres, Durin, and Fischl, with Durin and Fischl also doing their own sub DPS damage, so there's some valid potential there. There's also Knicht. You might be able to use him in a team like Knicht, Durin, Bennett, Iansan, with Durin replacing Emily, but keep in mind not having a second Dandro, you miss out on Skrull and Knicht's first rotation, which could make this end up not actually being an upgrade. Aside from those teams, there should also be possibilities for teams focused on hyper buffing Durin's own Black Dragon mode, such as perhaps Durin, Mona, Shalonen, and Nefa, with Mona on field driving to apply Hydro and extend her Omen duration. Melt variants with Seed Lally and Escoffier double Cryocar could also have potential for that forward melt damage. These are the primary team ideas I have for Durin right now. Once we have enough information to actually calc him, I'll be sure to provide an updated video with calcs and everything, but as of right now, my overall first impression of Durin is that he's kinda underwhelming. 20% res shred is not good as your only means of buffing. That's the same amount of buffing Zhongli gives, and we all know how underwhelming Zhongli is. Durin does have what seems to be pretty good sub DPS damage and pyro application alongside it, but for most teams, it doesn't seem like he'll be a big upgrade over other options they can currently use. For him to really be a meta impactful character, he might need a rather large buff, such as his res shred being increased from 20% to 40%. Keep in mind though, with Durin, he currently lacks a good artifact set. He's a burst-based sub-DPS, but Emblem isn't that good on him because he's not building much ER, so maybe in the near future we'll get a better set for him. Now moving on, we also have Jahoda, and she's a 4-star Anemo healer. She heals via her 70 cost burst, which will absorb an element, so she can help apply Hydro in your lunar teams. Characters Jahoda heals will have their elemental mastery increased by 100. If Jahoda is C6, she'll also provide 5 crit rate and 40 crit damage to characters from Not Cry. So the C6 basically restricts her into only being for Flints and Nefer right now. But aside from that buff being tied to the C6 of a new 4-star, there's two big problems. One, if using her with Flints or Nefer, you're now playing a mono Not Cry team and lose out on Not Cry resonance, making her total effective buffing over other options lower. And the second issue is, Jahoda's burst has an 18-second cooldown, while Flints and Nefer both want to perform 16-second rotations. So for Flints, I just don't see this being better than Sucrose at all. For Nefer, the rotation extension will more than likely make her just a side grade at best, while requiring C6 to even be worth using at all. So overall, Jahoda is looking, quite frankly, rather useless. If her burst cost were lowered to be 60, she could at least be the best sustained option for Nefer, but if that change doesn't happen, then she's just not looking to be good anywhere. And that's about all for now. Again, this was just first impressions, but I'll be sure to make full videos with calcs and everything once we have enough information to do so. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm curious to know what teams you're thinking of. Also, feel free to join my Discord where you can communicate with me and my community directly. Thanks, and goodbye.